Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, the family is going to approach the family to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya. Then we'll begin the funeral ceremony.
This is a hard day, but all of you have an easy job. And your job today is just to love. And you can do it because I've seen many of you do it before. It's a hard day, and the extended Orlove family needs all of your support and love. So as you sit here today and you have your own memories and you hear some more memories, just remember that your job today is to love. Death has taken our beloved Sarah. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, be with them. For Sarah's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for her companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks. It's a custom that we, at Jewish funerals, spend some time reading some selections from the Psalms. God, what are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass which in the morning shoots up renewed and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, "Return, O mortal creatures." Would that we were wise, that we understood where we were going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and the earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is our guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from harm. God will guard your soul, your coming and going, now and forever. I'll ask you now to join me in Psalm 123, which is in your folders. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He lead me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast announced my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. For everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. There'll be just a few speakers this morning. I invite friend and neighbor John Peters to come forward to speak first.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Peters. I'm a lifelong neighbor and friend to the Orlove family, along with my brother Jonas and our parents. We moved on to Fitch Avenue in 1971 in the spring. I was about a year and a half and change. Jonas was about 3 months old. And as a result, we have no childhood memories without the Orloves. So when I was asked to just share a few remarks, firstly in honor, of course, I'm appreciative of Chuck and the boys in allowing me this privilege, but it's a pretty easy assignment to speak kind words about a kind person. So I've been in ministry for 36 years. For the last 27 years, I've pastored a congregation just outside of St. Louis, Illinois side of the river in Columbia. And I've taught hundreds of church membership classes, and I've welcomed hundreds of new members into our fellowship. And every single membership class starts the same way. We talk about a lady who lived at 2711 West Fitch. And we talk about a family, not perfect, where there was love and kindness and compassion and belonging. Now, you have two kinds of houses when you're kids. The houses where you're not sure if you want your friends to hang out there, and the houses where you feel like you belong. And Sarah, and maybe Chuck with some reticence, allowed us to be there, but we always felt very much at home and part of the family. Just an incredibly kind and gracious person. Not perfect, but, I'm sure you all have your own stories, but I don't remember Sarah ever not being present and not being kind and not being instructionally Jewish in terms of just cautions and warnings and letting us know, put on another layer, things of that nature. Much will be made about her ability in terms of the kitchen and cooking and the desserts, and I afforded myself to those opportunities for sure. But it was more than that. There were always snacks after school. There was always just food in the house. And Sarah just, I think by her very nature, and I would say arguably one of the greatest qualities around the world, was perfectly hospitable. Her home, her family, her kitchen, her desserts, her cooking, her way, her garden, her backyard, her way of culture was an extension of who she was, and she welcomed all inside of that. So, whether we were at the JCC, a Little League game, all of it just began to shape our lives, and she was instrumental in all of that. I think of all the boys, Billy, Johnny, and Michael, and I know you might say Bill and John, I apologize, but I knew them with the Y at the back end. But all three had different interests, all three had different ways about them, but to have this mother who was this unconditional support system of love and cheering them on every step of the way, where they have become beautiful men with their own families and children who are secure in their love, and you just have to know that that was rooted in their mom's ability to welcome everybody. And so it's quite astonishing to me that legacy continues. I know in our tradition we often say, may her memory be a blessing. And I think sometimes we say that as a wish, but that's just fact. Her memory is a blessing because of who she was and the way that she cared for people. I was thinking of the word culture. It's probably not the best word, but if there was culture on our block, and our block did have a lot of culture on it. Interesting block. But Sarah was kind of the atmosphere of certain things that shaped us, maybe unknowingly. To this day, when I study and prep for things, I listen to classical music. The only home that ever played classical music was the Orloves. And I don't even know why that affected me, but I still remember that. I can remember trying my hand at gardening and remembering that Sarah was the first person I ever saw who had a garden, in a backyard garden. My wife and I love the theater. My first theater experience was going to watch Billy at the JCC in this theater group that he was in, and I was just hanging out with the Orloves. Johnny just got back from hiking around Europe for 500 miles, and they would drag us along to these walks for Israel. We couldn't go 3 blocks without being doused with talcum powder and drinking high C, and so those were just memories. First time I spun the dreidel, I was at Temple Bethel with the Orloves, and I didn't know who Haman was, but I learned to stomp my feet as Haman's name was being shouted out. And then, we would go to garage sales, but at Temple Bethel it was called a bazaar. And so I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. When I left for college and got married and had children of our own, my wife Sheila and I, it has always been our tradition up until recent years to come home for Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving was not complete until we walked across the street and we took part in the annual kind of open house Thanksgiving and dessert reception at the Orloves, where Sarah had spent, I don't know how many hours baking perfectly for all of us to enjoy. What a privilege it was for me to come back home all the time and introduce the next child to a family that has loved and cared for and accepted me for all my life. Lest you think there was not some spunk and she's not some 1970s version of June Cleaver, my brother wanted me to share a couple of thoughts as well. Apparently my brother, and I'm not sure where he got this from, but got into a scuffle at the JCC camp. And he was scolded for it. And we were at a Little League game apparently, and of course Sarah was in the stands. And apparently one of the moms, David Byers' mom, if you're in the room, I apologize. But I guess she was draying something terrible, and Sarah just turned to her and said, "Put a muzzle on it." It was Sarah who, I think, with Chuck, negotiated whether or not Michael, along with our basketball team, was going to be allowed to go to Cabrini Green and practice along with our coach, Wayne Coral. And for some unknown reason, she relented and allowed us to go and play basketball there as we were barred in. I recall one time being at the house, and I don't know, Mike was upstairs primping. I don't know what he was doing, but he used to take his pick, and he would just fluff his hair constantly to try to get it so perfect. And I was downstairs, and Sarah was talking to me, and I was probably in one of my phases. I was wearing hats, and all the time she said, "You know, John, if you keep wearing that, your hair's not going to be able to breathe, and you're going to go bald." Who knew? Lastly, I'll close with this. In the Torah in Leviticus 19:18, we're commanded to love our neighbors as ourselves. And the command says, "For I am the Lord." So how we are to love one another is rooted in who God is. It's rooted in how he demonstrates his love to all and how we are to reflect that. So I was thinking a lot this last days about what it means to be a neighbor. And I think for some, we get kind of stuck in the proximity issue, right? Who's close, who lives in the block, and that's true for us. But your neighbor is any and all that we have the privilege, the opportunity, and the responsibility to show love and kindness and compassion. Sarah was the best neighbor. Maybe more than even Mr. Rogers taught us how to love people well, to be hospitable, to welcome them always into our homes, our lives, our family, our children. My family, my brother and I are certainly the better for it. Boys and their families have been enriched with unconditional love and support. And honestly, Chuck has been exceptionally lucky for 60 plus years to have a love story where he just was able to share life with a precious woman. So we will miss our neighbor and our friend, and we are grateful for the impact she has had in our lives. Appreciate you allowing me to speak.
So because John ended with Torah, I feel as a rabbi I should start with it. So I'm going to start with Torah and then I'm going to veer off. You may know the story of Abraham and Sarah, the first Jews. And the story about Abraham and Sarah, there's many stories, but one of the stories about Abraham and Sarah, we often tell it at weddings, is that Abraham and Sarah's tent was open on all sides. And some people say that Abraham and Sarah's tent was open on all sides because it was hot in the desert and they wanted some breeze. But the story that the rabbis tell about Abraham and Sarah was their tent was open on all sides, so in the flat desert oasis around them, they could see guests coming from far away. And the minute They saw someone coming. Their house was already open. Their house was already open. They saw them from miles away and started to get ready. Put the plates out, put the food out, right? Just open on all sides. And that is what I think you've already heard a little. You'll hear more today and then more from her children and grandchildren, is not only was Sarah and Chuck's physical house open, but their house was open no matter where you saw them, right? You got off the L and happened to be at the same festival downtown, there was an open house living in Sarah's face. So I know John is a pastor and I'm a rabbi, but I think that this morning we're both going to speak as children of West Rogers Park. You know, if you grew up in West Rogers Park at the time that we did, though John and I don't know one another, we probably, played in the same yard at some time. If you grew up in West Rogers Park in the 70s and 80s, you're bonded, no matter what. And John, I'll tell you, it's taken me a while, but I've learned to say Bill, John, and Mike. But it took me a while. So I don't know exactly when I met Sarah and Chuck Orlove, but my parents moved onto Coyle Avenue when I was 7 months old, and my mom joined the PTA, Sarah joined the PTA. They were always together. The PTA ladies were in someone's basement doing some craft, making flyers, making plans, having once-a-month lunches that turned into once-a-month breakfasts that lasted, I think, for 50 years. They were ubiquitous, right? As a matter of fact, Chuck said last night we were very fortunate to be part of a family friend group with the Orloves. We talked about the Weiner family club, and someone would say, well, who is the Weiner family? And for years, we went up to Camp Shy together on an off weekend in September or October, and someone had to sign the contract, so it was the Weiner family. And it became the Weiner Family Club, and Chuck would say, yeah, we're all part of the Weiner family, none of us are related. But somehow, growing up, we were all part of the same family. I don't know if you know this, I didn't know this, or if I did, I didn't remember it until yesterday. I don't know if you know that Sarah Orlove was a movie star. Now, the kind of movie star like the stars in the sky, where they're really far away and you could hardly see them. But she was a movie star nonetheless. In 1979, a little bit against her prim and proper exterior, she brought Bill, John, and Mike to be extras in The Blues Brothers. Can't believe I just forgot those words. To be extras in The Blues Brothers. You know how old they are. 1979, the oldest was 14. Right? So there they are, on set, in a crowd, the Blues Brothers. They got extra money for having a car. In a 15-hour day, there they are, and then come the instructions. The kids couldn't be happier. The instructions from the director are, this is a scene, now if you've seen the movie, you know the scene. This is the scene where there are Nazis. The director says there's Nazis. You could say whatever words you want. And then he went on to list the words. Whatever words you want, you can say them. They're Nazis. Well, the boys had big smiles on their faces. They're like, oh, we're going to say it. And Sarah just couldn't bring herself to do it. You darn mean Nazis, right? Where all of the boys are saying every word they were never allowed to say. Now, I don't want you to get the feeling that it was only the boys that got that treatment. It's possible that from time to time, Chuck were to tell a story about the union guys he hung out with, and maybe the language got a little colorful. And there would be Sarah quietly saying, Chuck. We don't say those words in our house. What I said when we talked last night, that for many years of family friendship, it's okay if Sarah Orlove didn't use those words because my mother more than made up for it. Just a few more personal thoughts. I was thinking about how open their home was when everyone was talking about it. And I think I have this memory correct. We were all sitting, a bunch of us from that same theater group, from Footlighters, we were all packed in, eating and talking, and we wanted to buy a record album, right? We wanted to buy a record album by the B-52s, and not one of us could afford it, right? So sitting in the Orlove's house, we all chipped in like $1.52 so we could collectively own the album together. I think I know the person who still has the album. I don't know if they have a player to play it on, but there we were, over and over again, hanging out, making plans, buying a communal record album. You might have noticed I have gray hair. I've had gray hair for a long time. For a little bit of time, I tried to ignore it, but I have gray hair, and when Sarah went gray, she went gray a little bit early like me, a little bit young, and when I went gray, I thought, oh, Sarah Orlove has rocked this style. I'm not as curlier on rainy days, but I was like, if Sarah Orlove can do it, I can do it. When I was talking to family, there's one other thing I was told that I didn't know before I close, that when new members came into the family, children, grandchildren, spouses, that Sarah was so incredibly welcoming. She wanted to throw showers, right? Oh, we're going to throw a shower. No, that's okay. You don't have to. We're throwing a shower. You're getting presents. We're celebrating you, right? Going shopping. Sarah never bought very much, but she loved to go shopping. She loved the art of the coupon. She loved sharing it with the people she loved, right? Even if it wasn't for her. I'm going to end with a story about a gift that she gave to my family that maybe she gave unknowingly, I'm not sure, but 17 years ago, I told my family that I wanted to adopt a child. I never was married, so I wanted to adopt a child by myself, and my parents were worried about what that might look like. And 17 years ago, my parents were talking to their friends, and they said, my mother specifically said, I'm not sure I'll be able to love an adopted kid the way that I would be able to love a kid that was from my own flesh and blood. And Sarah Orlove said, with a probably 9 or 10-year-old adopted granddaughter, Sarah Orlove said, oh, yes, you will. Oh, yes, you will. Sarah said, it's going to be just fine. And so she put my parents' minds at ease, which helped my mind be a little bit more at ease and helped us have the gift of a boy who's turning 18 tomorrow. So it's a gift that we're incredibly grateful for. As soon as they catch their breath, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Orloves are criers. As soon as they catch their breath, I'm going to invite Bill, John, and Michael forward to share a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here today. It's been a very challenging time for our family, and it means the world that all of you are here. So many came from far away places to pay your respects to our dear mother. We're very appreciative. All the messages and love and food that we've received these past days have been really overwhelming and very thankful and really meaningful. We are blessed to have today's service, and speakers include friends that we grew up with, and more importantly, friends who knew our mom really well. So very special and meaningful for us, and thank you, John Peters. I think I always called you John. I don't think I called you Johnny. This was Johnny. And thank you, Rabbi Manowith, for making this very personal. So as a family, we prepared some thoughts and remembrances to share. This comes from all of us, including daughters-in-law and our grandkid and my mom's grandkids. As Rabbi Manowith mentioned, for those who know the Orloves well enough, you know that we wouldn't make it past the second sentence without crying. And our collective document would probably take 45 minutes to get through rather than the 10 or 15. So it's been a very emotional week for us. We're going to pass that honor back to the rabbi to read our thoughts. I do want to close. Many people have been asking about the pins that we're wearing. My mom had a very eclectic taste with scarves and different accessories. She loved her pins, and I think it wasn't my idea, but we all decided to honor her by wearing her pins. So, yeah, that's the story. I'll hand it back to you. Thank you all for being here very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And I didn't cry.
I just want to make it clear that Michael didn't call me Rabbi Manowith when we were growing up. Nor does he have any obligation to now. So, as I said, this is a collaboration of the entire family, including two grandchildren, Alvaro and Lola, who aren't here today. None of this would have been possible without Sarah and Chuck meeting on a blind date at Moody's Pub in the early 1960s. While substitute teaching at a Chicago school, coworker Miriam, Harvey Orlove's wife, looked her over, saw no ring on her finger, and asked if she could fix her up on a blind date with Chuck. A large spring storm erupted the evening they planned their first date. I called Sarah up and asked, "How old are you?" Chuck said. After Sarah answered, Chuck said, "Well, it's been that long since we haven't known each other. Another week isn't gonna hurt." When they finally went on that date, they found they were instantly compatible, building a 60-year-plus love story. While Sarah lived most of her life in Chicago, her formative years were spent in Wisconsin. She came from a large, extended family full of Klymans, Lucks, and Starobins living in Milwaukee. She loved to retell stories of visiting Uncle Harry's farm, her father's dry goods store, getting together for family celebrations, being the tomboy among a bunch of male cousins, and teaching us some of the Yiddish words and phrases that were part of her upbringing. Bubkis and don't be a schnorrer were some of her favorites. At some point, Sarah hoped to have a daughter. Raising 3 rambunctious boys was certainly a challenge. Adding her brother Max and sister-in-law Lil's 4 boys exponentially increased the tumult whenever they got together. The 3 sons have vivid memories of being chased with a wooden spoon when they misbehaved. John remembers piling pillows up on a chair in the living room for a brother to jump up and off. She was not pleased, sternly holding that wooden spoon. Some of the boys even had their mouths washed out with soap or were smacked by an elementary school principal with her approval. I know that principal. May her memory be a blessing. The threat of having Chuck know about their mischievousness was enough to keep them in line for a short time. Sarah was an inherently kind person and not one who her children feared. For all the grief she must have endured, she was finally rewarded with 3 wonderful daughters-in-law, Laura, Rebecca, and Joanna, who she loved, welcomed into the family and treated as her own daughters, and 4 grandchildren, Marissa, Alvaro, Lola, and Dahlia, whom she loved, supported, and cared for. For many years, Sarah worked as a public and private school teacher. However, her real passion was creating and sustaining a proper, warm, and responsible household. She was the glue that held the family together and kept them well fed. "Nobody does it like Sarah Lee" is a tagline some of us remember from an old ad slogan of the corporate baker. For Sarah, it encapsulated her exceptional baking skills. No one made better mandel bread in 2 flavors, consistently hand-cut and shaped to perfection. They were a prized treat at any gathering. Both her children and grandchildren relished getting a Ziploc bag of these goodies. If they were really good, and she had the time, you might have been treated to a container full. Her moist and flavorful Rosh Hashanah honey cake was a feat that some family members are still trying to accomplish. When someone tried to replicate her recipe, it would never turn out exactly as she made it. That's because there was always a little something extra she didn't write down. I usually take it out of the oven a little early and let it cool a bit. I usually turn the oven down halfway through, or some other little tip she would share with you after you made it. During the pandemic, some of the novice family bakers learned from the master, making her tasty cheesecake over a Zoom call. As an homage to her grandmother, Lola, who shared her love of baking, perfectly made her banana chocolate chip cheesecake over the weekend. Her trusty, buttery yellow KitchenAid proudly sits on Marissa's kitchen counter. Thankfully, her children and grandchildren have many of her recipes, so that every bite of one of her favorite treats will keep her memory alive. For many years, as John mentioned, Sarah and Chuck hosted a tremendous feast on Thanksgiving for sometimes more than 30 family members and friends who may have not had a place to celebrate the holiday. The preparation leading up to the big feast were epic, and Sarah ruled the kitchen with a rotation of dishes and platters flying in and out of the ovens, down to a science. Everything was from scratch, and the energy in the room matched the expectations of the meal. Everyone gobbled up her stuffed mushrooms, Swedish meatballs, and phyllo dough spinach triangles. The kitchen table overflowed with desserts, multiple cheesecakes, chocolate mousse cakes, lemon meringue pie, apple pie, and the thinnest, crispiest chocolate cookies, and more. The reputation of the Thanksgiving feast spread to Spain, where Rebecca's parents, brother, and cousin coordinated their vacation around the end of November to be in Chicago in order to take part. I think they're watching now. Even with dozens of neighbors, friends, and relatives invited after the meal, there would still be leftovers, some of which made for enjoying the next day at breakfast. The food is only part of the story. Marissa remembers the holiday crafts waiting for her on the kitchen table, the glass jars filled with Hershey's Kisses, and the artifacts from her grandparents' world travels elegantly decorating the space. Simchas, Yiddish for joy or happiness, were always celebrated. Sarah always made birthdays special. Growing up, the 3 boys picked their favorite meal, which she would make along with a special cake or pie. As everyone got older and was spread out across the country, she found a new way to celebrate: homemade birthday cards. Hallmark could not top her creativity. She would mount the celebrants' heads on various images she found in magazines, usually tied to the recipient's interests, achievements, or season. The birthday boy or girl never knew what they were going to receive, but they always looked forward to the surprise in the mailbox. The celebrant could be a ballerina, a muscular beach bum, an athlete, or a world traveler. She expanded her talents to anniversary cards as well. As any mother would be, she was always concerned for her children's and grandchildren's welfare. She was selfless, always putting everyone's well-being ahead of hers. She was always the last person to the dinner table, encouraging everyone to eat before she was seated and offering seconds when their plates were empty. "Can I get you something?" was her mantra. "Maybe you should take a jacket," she said to Bill when he was walking out of the house with his roommate looking for an apartment in Evanston after graduating from Michigan. "This is why I want to have a place of my own," Bill said. Was it nagging or nudging? At the time, maybe. However, everyone knew it was said out of love. "I found something in the newspaper I thought you'd be interested in," she often said to one of her children or grandchildren. When family members would visit Chicago, she would have sections of the newspaper saved with all the special events happening in the city. She always saved the newspaper articles and other recognition of her family members' achievements, even when she was in failing health. She would always ask if you wanted something. Sometimes it's the little everyday gestures, not the grand ones, that show her love and connection with you. She certainly enjoyed being a grandmother. Her grandchildren appreciated her warmth and kindness, putting them before herself. Alvaro remembers the walks to Navy Pier and how he and Lola were excited to have her and Chuck pick them up from preschool at Bright Horizons across from the Daily Center. Lola cherished the smell of Eggo waffles when she woke up at a sleepover and endured her gentle suggestions to put on a bigger layer, it's cold outside. Dahlia also enjoyed sleepovers because Sarah would let her pick the movie, accompanied by a heavy helping of ice cream, and sing lullabies until she fell asleep. When she was older, Sarah let Dahlia pick a couple of favorites from her jewelry collection. After Marissa moved to Chicago for college, she enjoyed Sunday brunch or dinner dates with her grandparents. While Chuck shared pieces of city history, Sarah would ask about her classes, career dreams, and when Graham came into the picture, lovingly needled her about when they would get married. Both Sarah and Chuck had a love for culture, music, theater, opera, and art, to name a few. They certainly provided the three boys with exposure to everything they enjoyed. She loved movies, especially those from Hollywood's golden era into the early mid-1900s. Even when her short-term memory waned, she could tell you the name of a movie, the actors in it, the year it was made, where she saw it, and how much the ticket cost. She also enjoyed music. She introduced Chuck to opera. She loved listening to Chuck Shaden's Those Were the Days radio program, featuring the music and radio programs of her childhood. The boys have memories of the Grant Park Symphony Orchestra concert and her playing music she enjoyed in the house and the car, which prompted their own love of different musical styles. Her love of culture extended to almost 20 years as a volunteer greeter and information representative for the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs at the Chicago Cultural Center. She so enjoyed being connected to all of the arts and cultural happenings throughout Chicago, and everyone knew her, from the security guards and custodians to the cultural affairs staff. One day, Yo-Yo Ma was in the Cultural Center for a meeting and was introduced to Sarah. A bit shell-shocked, she quipped, "You know, I tried so hard to get my son Michael to play music, but he never had an interest." Yo-Yo Ma replied, "Whatever you did, you should be commended for raising such a great son." Sarah always had a very specific way of dressing. Sometimes it would take her time to pick out the perfect outfit. Sometimes she would change multiple times until she found the right thing to wear. On special occasions, she would sport an accessory that showed her simple elegance, especially a pin or a scarf, as Michael mentioned. Her outfits always seemed to complement her blue eyes and perfectly coiffed silvery curls. While in hospice care, classical music played for Sarah to enjoy. A piece by Franz Schubert, transcribed by Franz Liszt for piano, was playing when she died. It was a poem set to classical music. Translated from German, part of the poem includes the following. Amidst the shimmering waves, the swaying boat glides like swans. Ah, oh, gently on shimmering waves of joy, the soul glides like the boat. From heaven, down onto the waves, the sunset dances around the boat. For her children and grandchildren, the years and moments together, whether captured in photos, food, or memories, will keep her spirit alive. May her name and her life be a blessing for all who knew and loved her. Thank you guys all so much for writing that. Thank you to Alvaro and Lola and to other extended family watching from afar. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we'll remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we'll remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we'll remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we'll remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we'll remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we'll remember her. When we're lost and sick at heart, we'll remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we'll remember her. So long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of us, and we'll remember her. It's custom now to take a few moments for your own silent reflection before we recite the memorial prayer. God, you give us loved ones and make them the strength of our life, the light of our eyes. They depart and leave us bereft on a lonely way, but you are the living fountain from which our healing flows. To you the stricken look for comfort and the sour laden for consolation. O God, we see life as through windows that open on eternity. We see that love endures and the soul endures. We see that the years are more than grass that withers, more than flowers that fade. They weave a timeless pattern in a world that is the dwelling place of love and glory. Ask you please now to rise in body or spirit. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, Im Kiroshim U'Tehorim, Ki Zor Rakia Mazirim. Et nishmat Sor Leah bat Zev Miriam shalcha l'olama. Balarachamim Yastira beseter kanfav l'olamim. Vayitzor bitzor hachayim et nishmata. Adonai hu nachlata. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkava. V'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Sarah Lee Orlove, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us together say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Waldheim Cemetery, and that's in Forest Park. The family will be returning to the funeral home for between 4 and 7 p.m. for Shiva, so everyone is invited to return here between 4 and 7, memorial contributions in her memory to the Parkinson's Foundation. That information can be found on the service folder that you received upon entering the chapel. If you do not get one, we have them as you exit the chapel. For those of you who are joining us online, all that information can be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to her casket. Marissa Orlove, Joe Kleiman, Jonas Peters, Jeff Orlove, Mark Kleiman, and Steve Greenberg. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Sarah Lee Orlove, along with her family and Rabbi Toby Manwith, from the chapel, and then you may return to your cars.